Hey beauty, welcome back to the Revive Life. I'm your host, Samantha Schmuck, and today we are diving in with my guest, Annie P Ruggles, and I am extra pumped about this episode because I know so many of you in this community will be served by this conversation, and it's learning how do we break free of that really sleazy selling tactic that we think we have to do in order to convert clients to work with us, to move our mission forward, to create impact, and ultimately create a life of freedom by creating finances on our own terms. We go through things that like how Annie went from over marketing and underselling to revive her business through win-win heart-centered selling, learning how to fall in love with selling to create opportunity for all, the difference between serving and leading, noticing where resistance comes up in your body when you're wanting to expand and serve yourself in the process, learning to own the ask, and so much more. So if any of that resonates, you will definitely want to buckle up for this episode because it is so much fun. Before we dive in, I have to take a second to tell you about the Vibe and Embodiment program because it pairs so beautifully with this episode and really standing in your truth through and through and learning to embody that expanded version of yourself while learning how to move differently through the fears, through the limiting beliefs, and releasing that energy from your body. You can head over to revived-living.com to sign up to be on the waitlist for our next program or sign up to join us for our next free Vibe and Embodiment class. You can head to revive-living.com to sign up for the waitlist for either the program or the class, and I cannot wait to share this method with you. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive in. Annie P Ruggles, welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you on today.
It is my delight to be here, Samantha. Thank you for having me.
Yes, you are so welcome. And I am just so excited and stoked for this conversation because everything about Revive Living is turning your life around, consciously creating it. And I know one of the biggest things that really holds people back from taking charge and consciously creating their life is this idea of, but can I create income on my own?
Yes.
And to do that, right, we have to be willing to sell. But a lot of times when it's healers or coaches or somebody who's coming from a kind-hearted place, they hear that word sell and they immediately shut down and close off. So this is going to be a juicy conversation. And I just love to kind of kick things off with like, who are you and what brought you to doing what you're doing and serving the world in the way that you are today?
I love that word that's at the core of your brand, that verb to revive, because who I am in the context of all of this is I am a person who almost killed my small business a million different ways. But if we boil all those million different ways down, I was the ask avoidant do-gooder that we were just talking about. I was like the spiritual coach, over deliverer who really just wanted to get out there and make a difference and use my voice and use my skills to be, I think, what people call a servant leader. I don't use that term for myself, but I served so much I couldn't lead. And as such, I was constantly in this warring state within my business and within myself of, am I serving enough? And am I going to be able to keep this business alive? Because I was the person that you mentioned that ran for the hills when I heard the word sell. I was the person that thought, I cannot abuse my clients in that way. I cannot forsake everything I've tried to create energetically in that way. And so I avoided what I thought was selling completely for years until I put myself into severe adrenal fatigue, extreme financial failure, just like debt upon debt upon debt, like just crazy. I had as many healthy hormones as I did dollars in the bank, meaning none, right? And I didn't see it in myself until I saw it in my clients because I was doing marketing and branding work with them, and they were incredible people, the best people, the best providers, so much heart, so much wisdom, and they were struggling. And I thought, well, why are they struggling? That doesn't make sense. And then I realized they were modeling me, that
Mm.
they were also over marketing and underselling. And I said, something's got to change. And so I have dedicated my career and my life since that turning point to reviving my own business and helping others revive theirs through the act of win-win heart-centered selling.
I love that. And right, like just to have that like come to Jesus moment with yourself, right? Like I think
Oh
one of the
yeah.
most beautiful things about coaching is it always puts you in that fire of transformation, right? Because you see your clients and you're like, why are they butting up against the ceiling? Why are they butting up a ceiling? And then you're like, oh, I'm the ceiling. I have
Oh
to
yes.
expand even further so that way they can keep expanding and not like get hitched by my ceiling and where I'm currently at.
And it was brutal, but it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? It was both. It had to be brutal so I could break through to the point of change and growth. Like you said, like I had to kind of blow it up and realize, like you said so perfectly, I was the ceiling. And I was telling them there was no ceiling,
Mm.
but there
Mm-hmm.
was a ceiling. And then finding out that you are the ceiling was mortifyingly embarrassing. It felt like a massive failure. And meanwhile, I'm like relying on my clients to be like, "Did I screw you up? Are you okay?" And my clients are like, "Annie, we love you. Everything's fine. What are you talking about? Okay, you're gonna help us make more money. Great. Like, calm down. Be nicer to yourself." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, because me sitting here and whining about the problem that I have propagated isn't gonna fix anything for me or for my clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I may as well get excited and proactive and fall in love with selling in a way that it creates opportunity for all." But at first it was just horrible, just awful feeling of like, wow, I am a fraud, I'm a phony, I had the worst imposter syndrome in the world. But then I realized, I'm like, hey, you're making it about you, Annie, and it's not about you, Annie. It's about the impact. It's about the work. So get out of your own ego and back into your own message, and that's what I had to do.
Yes. And that's the right, that's a journey. Like it's the ego will always pull us in and then we have to realize like, hey, this is where we're going right now. This is not going to help you move it forward and just to like recognize and step back out of it. So I love that you shared that so much. Thank you. And you had said something that really like sparked and I was like, "Oh, I really just want to know like what percolated for you on this phrase and I'd love to know if there's like more to it, but I was serving so hard I couldn't lead."
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the difference that you see, especially in the coaching industry, with these people who are wanting to serve and like over deliver and provide for their clients. Like, what's the difference between serving and leading from what you found?
If you made all of your money off of racehorses, okay, let's just say you do. You're a gajillionaire and you make all your money off of racehorses. Those horses would eat the best hay, the best food, the best nutrition. They would have incredibly well paid trainers. They would be bathed constantly. They would be brushed gorgeously. They would have the most fashionable jackets. And they would never want for anything because that horse is your asset. In a coaching or healing practice, we are our own racehorse. But we starve ourselves, we beat ourselves, we belittle ourselves, and we exhaust ourselves. How can we possibly truly serve from that state? We can't. And what happens is we feel like we are until we burn ourselves out. And what happens when a heart-centered person burns out? This is terrible, Samantha. It happened to me. It's happened to my clients. It's happened to hundreds of people I've
Happened to
spoken to
me.
since. We become resentful
Mm.
of the people that we're trying to help because we start to adopt a, well, what have they ever done for me attitude, which we do not intend. It sounds horrific. We're like, I would never feel that way about my clients. Yes, you would when you're working 80 bucks, when you're working 80 hours a week for 80 bucks. And your rent comes due and you can't pay it. Yes, you will. You'll be like, how am I so tired? I thought my clients were going to blank. I thought my clients were going to pay me. I thought my clients were going to re-enroll. I thought my clients were going to bring me testimonials or referrals. They don't if you're not asking them to, right? And so what happens is we take our best asset, which is ourselves. We strip ourselves of all power. We serve and serve and serve and serve until we can't serve anymore. And then we do what we've always done, which are the actions of service, but we don't have that service mindset anymore. We're coming at it from a place of stress, of lack, of anger, of sadness, and all of the other emotions, so that even if our clients somehow, despite us, are getting ahead, we're staying in the same spot or going backwards. And that's not right. We are the people who are so keyed into trying to elevate others and elevate the vibration of the planet, literally, if you're a healer, but we're not including ourselves in that success. And that's what has to change. We have to look for the win-win. We have to look for, I am going to be of this world and of service to this world, but I am also willing, excited, and able to receive.
I'm so glad I asked that because there was so much juiciness in that, and it's so spot on. I mean, I've so felt that way. I've definitely burned myself off through coaching way too many people, right? And it's like, I remember like having to record these videos for a former job and like snot coming down my nose, and it was for a health and wellness company, right?
Yeah.
And I had to hit a deadline. It's like, well, I'm sick, but I've got to hit my deadline. And like the resentment, the anger that like fueled internally, knowing that my body was failing because I was trying to do this. And so let me just know if I'm picking up what you're putting down. But to be a leader, it means filling up your own cup, making sure you're nourishing yourself so that way you have things to give to other people, where service is just like, I'm going to do for other people and hope there's some left over for me at the end.
Yes, 100%. And the nourishment I rebelled against most was nourishing myself financially. Right? I mean, and it's all related. Right? So like when I was struggling in my business, I gained a ton of weight. I whacked out all of my hormonal systems. My sleep went to hell. Like, I'm lucky my relationships didn't go to hell. I'm lucky that my hobbit husband is adorable and exceedingly patient, and that my best friends are like, oh, that's Annie, she'll figure it out, right? But the hardest way, when I was coming back, I'm like, okay, I need to clean up my eating. I need to return to forms of movement that feel really good. I need to try to sleep more, drink more water. All of those things were very conscious choices that I had some resistance against, but it didn't even compare to the resistance I encountered when I was like, I need to raise my rates.
And what was in that resistance for you?
Just
like, where did you feel it in your body? Let's start there. Like,
where did I feel it in my body? I felt it so severely in my back and in my stomach that I gave myself gallbladder issues. Did you know that you feel gallbladder issues in your neck? You do. It's weird. It feels like someone's stabbing you. It was absolutely awful, and it never felt like indigestion. So I was like, oh, it's got to be like a heart attack, right? Like I got to be doing something to my heart or my cardiac system or something like that. No, it was my gallbladder. Very, very crabby gallbladder. But the other thing I would do is I would clench and grind my teeth. And when I would lay in bed at night in order to rest, it would take me forever to sink into the mattress because I would literally have to go like finger by finger, joint by joint, like relax your thumb, relax your palm, relax your wrist. It had to be so deliberate because my body was so, it was so clenched. I'm amazed that I didn't turn into a diamond. Like it was just like, rah! At all times, right? Because I was living in that panicked response place.
Yep.
Because truly, I was running on fumes and had nothing left to give. I just didn't. As badly and desperately as I wanted to give, I had nothing. And the reason I had nothing was because I asked for nothing. And I asked for nothing never. Right? Like I didn't even, number one, I didn't ask for anything. Number two, I never asked at all. So of course I was depleted. I was expecting some kind of universal energetic reciprocity, which sounds really, really gorgeous and happens in terms of emotions, but does not happen in terms of finances.
And that's where I really wanted to start with that question because I think a lot of the times, like especially in the coaching industry, we're so good at
Mhm.
thinking. We're so good at thinking
Oh
and like
yeah, we're good
reeling
thinkers.
it through and then like trying to make sense of it. What's the meaning that I'm making here? And like, right, like we can really like have a campfire with ourselves and just like go through all the thoughts that we're thinking and just like sit in it, right? But
Hmm.
when we can understand the effect that not moving through a limiting belief is having on our body, is having on our life, is having on our relationships, like we can lie to ourselves with our thoughts. Our body is not going to lie to us. So if
No.
we can start to tune in and we can be like, wow, I'm now feeling right where I was numb. I was so in my head. I was disconnected. I couldn't feel it. But with all of a sudden, we're like, okay, yeah, you're not sleeping. Your neck is creaked. This is this. This is this. It's like, it's giving you all the information to slow down and say, okay, whoa, what is actually happening here? So I always love to just bring up that question so that way people can really start to look more so at what's their body experiencing and how is that like measure of intuition and like how is it
Yes.
hitting versus just being like being up in my head and I got to think my way through this.
Yes, 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 yes. You're totally, completely right. Your head will tell you a whole bunch of garbage. But if you hurt, if you ache, if you can't sleep, if your hair's falling out in freaking clumps, we got a problem, babe. And the problem is probably your. I hesitate to use the word self care because then we think of like take a bath. Baths are great. Baths are my favorite freaking thing. Baths are not going to make you money.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a bath, psyching yourself up, getting on a sales call and asking for money will make you some money, but the bath itself will not.
Agreed.
Right? But it's because we're not prioritizing our needs in the context of our work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Like you said, self-care. Yeah, I always used to get my panties bent out of shape when people would be like, "Oh, massage, nails," and I'm like, "No, that is like such like the tip of the iceberg when it comes to actual self-care. Like that's like icing on the cake. That's not like foundational self-care." So, when it came to changing up your relationship with finances, like how did you go from not asking for anything to falling in love with that part of your business?
I had to look and see what was out there. I had to prove or disprove my own opinions of selling. And so what I did was I read 138 sales books within a year.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
I went bananas. So I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and in this aspect, it was a humongous gift because I was just like cookie monstering these sales books. I was just like, nom, 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 ah! And not surprisingly, I found a whole lot of stuff that I didn't like. But extremely eye-openingly, surprisingly, I found a whole bunch of stuff that I was like, that sounds great. I can do that. That sounds easy. That sounds natural. And the key for me to fall in love with sales is the way that the selling industry, by and large, looks at the art and gift of empathy. All of these sharkish sales books are telling their sharkish students, hey, you need to try to learn some empathy. Meanwhile, my coaches, my healers, and me have empathy coming out of our pores, like you with your runny nose in that health video. Like we exude it constantly, but we don't see the value of empathy in those selling situations. So I said, if I were going to create a methodology specifically called Sales for Empaths, which I did, what would that look like? What would truly empathic, emotionally responsible, loving sales look like? And I cobbled together the pieces I liked. I rebelled against the pieces I hated. And I realized that in those two combinations, by physically pushing away, forcing away the sleaze and the nastiness and the arm twisting, what was left was that pure art of asking. If I could focus on listening, if I could focus on empathy, that started to feel really good. So then I just started asking. I started experimenting in my business and I loved it. And people around me started to take notice. They're like, Annie, it looks like your business is freaking killing it. What are you doing? I'm like, I made one really foundational but altogether pretty small thing. I started asking.
Mm.
So then with my most beloved clients and the people that I was, so grateful to still have after this all of these years of self-discovery, I went to some of my VIPs and I said, "Hey, listen, total curveball. Can I give you a couple of sessions? Can we work on your sales stuff? Or will you be a beta tester? I'm going to run you through sales for empaths and see if it works for you. And it did. And I asked them, why is this happening? And they said, because it's everything I like about connection and nothing I dislike about manipulation. And it's challenging, but it's not unattainable. And that's what I want. Because here's the thing. Getting rejected sucks. It still sucks. It totally sucks. It's hard. Business is hard. Selling can be hard, but it doesn't have to be painful, and it doesn't have to involve anything that goes beyond your ethics or integrity or personality. You get to sell exactly how you show up that day. And when I allowed myself to understand and experience those things, my perception of selling changed. My perception of what selling required of me changed. And I began to show up differently.
I love that. Like rebelling against like all the sharkish, squeamish, silliness, and because I think that's one of the coolest parts is like coaches, healers, like they know how to connect on such a deep level, but they have such a disconnect that that's not what's going to get them to the sale. And it's like, no, that's everything that's going to get you to that sale, and like getting them bought in to the vision and the transformation that you guys can create together and the belief right in themselves. But that like all of a sudden you're like, oh, and it's this amount of money and you have to pay for this date.
Yes. That's it exactly, right? If we had been having this entire podcast chat like this, just like now, but if this were a sales conversation instead, and we'd still be having the same conversation, we'd still be talking about how I got here and what I've learned and what I want to teach and all these things, right? But if we got to the point of me being like, okay, I'd love for you to join my membership. You have a membership, I have a membership. It's time for us to talk about our memberships. And suddenly I went, Samantha, I'm so excited that you have decided to embark upon non-sleazy selling. Now, I need to talk to you about payment plans. You'd be like, who the hell is this? Who is this? Meanwhile, I hear one of the things I hear all the time is people are like, well, Annie, I'm not loud like you. I'm not gregarious like you. Imagine this. You are a lovely, quiet, introverted, soothing, high vibe person. You're having a sales conversation, and then finally you're like, all right, I'm going to run out of time on this 20-minute discovery call. I better get some pitching in. And suddenly you are like, you've created this gorgeous atmosphere, and then you feel the need to sell, and you're like, okay, Samantha, we've had a great time together today. I'm like, why are you suddenly talking like a pirate? Who are you? Like, what is going on? And it's because we feel that in order to sell or be a salesperson, we have to morph into someone other than us. And what that does is that confuses the prospect. And the reason we do that is we feel the need to create emotional separation between the intimacy we've created and the dollar sign. But when we do that in that manner, we wind up doing what we fear anyway. We alienate and violate the client in that way by becoming a shapeshifter, by changing who we are, instead of saying, I'm going to stay in my ethics, integrity, and purpose and passion. I'm going to honor the person on the other end of this transaction, but I am going to say, this is how I can help you, and the price for that is this, and I'm going to stay in that vibe, and I'm going to stay in that place, and I'm going to hold that space for them so that they can make a decision about whether or not whatever the heck I'm offering them is truly their next best step.
I love versus just like the all of a sudden the curtain switches and like a whole new you comes out.
Oh my gosh, it's terrifying. It's so scary. And what happens when you watch, so in addition to reading the 138 sales books, another way what I studied is I went out to my beloved list and my friends and everything, and I said, send me all your sales calls. Good, bad, ugly, I don't care. Don't label them. Don't tell me if they're good or bad. Just send them to me. I need to look for patterns. And what happens when you watch the calls on the people that sent me video is,
oh goodness, that's amazing.
They physically repel the client. The client who's leaned in and intent, like on Zoom and into it, making eye contact, totally dedicated. You start going in with that high energy spiel nastiness, and you can watch the client not slowly, instantaneously pull back as far as they possibly can so it looks like they're doing a crunch.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
they are back, they are out because they're trying to disengage. They're not disengaged because you're talking about money. They're disengaged because they don't know who the hell you just turned into.
Mm-hmm. Which is such a key thing that, like, when, like, I've been a part of coaching schools and whatnot, and when they're talking about, like, the initial discovery call, converting and closing the sale, they don't really talk about the energy, right? Like, it's about the conversation, it's about, like, making sure that you sell the transformation and the vision versus the logistics, but they don't really talk about who you're being in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And right, like it's always about the money, and like, do you have limiting beliefs around money? Don't get caught up in their money objections. Like, everything gets focused around the money because that's such like a thing in culture that we've avoided for so long. So when they're training around it, like, it's always about the money and what's your money story, what's their money story. Like, don't buy into their money story, like hold whatever is possible for them. But again, like, it's focused there versus like, are you being the same person when you deliver that message versus just
Yes.
being caught up in like, is there an objection? What's the money story? Like, again, get out of your head, get into your body.
How can you accurately listen if you're that up your own nose?
Yeah.
It's not possible, right? Because, like what you said, you brought up objections. How can I know how open, honest, and vulnerable with me? How can I know how to best soothe or persuade you if I'm not listening because I'm sitting there performing? I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's the other thing with these discovery calls is your number one job on that call. I don't care how much content you feel like you need to get through. Your number one job on that call, my darlings, is to shut your beautiful mouths and listen so that you can identify whether or not you are a mutually productive fit. And then based on that fit, you can offer them. And then once you offer them, based on the conversation, you say, and the price for that is, right? But so often, another thing I see where the client kind of goes, whoa, is, and we've all had this experience, is we sit down for a discovery call. We know we're going to be sold to. We're not stupid. We've had a million discovery calls before. But the second we get on the call, we feel like we got to put our seatbelt on because we're about to get swept up into a spiel that has nothing to do with us. We brace ourselves for the word vomit to come.
Mm-hmm.
Is that empowering?
No.
Am I able to make great decisions on that way?
No, like you said, you're bracing. You're not even open to what's possible.
I can't even think clearly, right? One of the ways that I always put this in terms of this discovery call thing, and I love them. I have them. I think they're freaking great. But if you went to a restaurant you were really excited about for a special occasion, and after the waiter welcomed you and told you about the restaurant, brought you your water, whatever it is, if they said, hey, would you like to hear about the specials? And you said, yes, I'd love to hear about the specials. And they told you about the specials. And then instead of leaving your table, they said, did I tell you about the salmon? Did I tell you about the sauce on the salmon? Did I tell you about the vegetables for the salmon? Did I tell you about all these other things? Did I tell you that we got written up in timeout? Did I tell you that my uncle was here yesterday? Did I tell you that the mayor was here yesterday? Did I tell you that Barbara Streisand has eaten here twice? Did I tell you those things? You would leave the restaurant. You would be like, I don't want to eat here. This place is assaulting me. Auditorily, but still, it's assaulting me. That's what we do on sales calls when we're like, so what are your objections? Okay. All right. So objections are really important. And I really do want to hear yours. But like, but just so you know, like, you're safe to object to me. Like, everything is totally fine. And you're like, shut up. Please, 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 please. That's the irony of my life, is that someone as loud as me gets to tell such beautiful people to shut up on a daily basis because I'm like, zip it. It's not about you. We have to give them space to self-advocate. We have to give them space to decide. If we babble, they cannot decide.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is the most empowering. Like, if we talk about empowering or not empowering, being at choice and like just being presented, being deeply listened to, connected with, and then being like, do I want more of this or don't I? I think that's what I always focus on when I have like alignment sessions is what I would call them with clients. I love 90 minutes because I wanted to so deeply connect and coach them on that call as if they were my client and they paid for that session, right? So like it felt very mutually beneficial, energetic exchange, but I wanted them to know that this was solely about them, that they didn't have to worry about me pitching to them and like completely shifting the gear on them, like, okay, like thanks for telling me about you, here's what I can do. And like I just told them right from the get-go, like, this call is predominantly about you. I just want to tell you this at the beginning in case this is something that you want to continue forward with. This is how I work with clients. This is at the price point that it's at. And then I just like drop it. We get into the call. And then at the end, it's like, so did we enjoy this? Do we want to do more of it? What questions are coming up? And that has always felt so good for me.
Yes. You show your cards. So there's no confusion. You show your cards and then you prove your value. I love that.
Yeah, that always felt way better to me versus like, man, 20 minutes to connect. Like, I know that's just not my style. So I was like, 90 minutes was my sweet spot. And I think that's what's beautiful about owning your own business is you get to decide. You get to decide. But the biggest thing is to know, if you are somebody who is avoiding this part of the conversation, like you need to dive into it with everything that Annie is saying. Because if you don't nail and master this part and you don't nourish yourself in this way, like your dream, your vision is not going to be sustainable long term. And then you're going to feel where we have felt, where we get jaded, angry, upset. And that is just not the space that's going to help us move the needle forward.
Absolutely not.
So yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious. So you talk about know, like, trust, and that's like a phrase that we always hear in the industry when connecting. But I'm curious, what would you say is the most important piece or kind of final part to that makes it really sweet in terms of this conversation?
Know, like, trust is a beautiful uniced cupcake. In that, is it good? Yes. Is it satisfying? Yes. Could it be infinitely better, though? Is that where the artistry is? Heck yes, that artistry is in the icing. So one of the things that I always say is that know, like, trust is very correct and very true. It is a wonderful way to build brand awareness. It is a wonderful way to become popular. But this is not high school. Popularity doesn't matter. Staying power matters. And so what happens, though, is we get stuck in that know, like, trust place. We aim for those things. We should. Everybody should trust us because we're showing up in a trustworthy way. Fantastic. How lovely to aspire to, right? But what happens is we go, oh, they know me, they like me, they trust me, so that means that they're going to shell over all of their money and they're going to sign up the second I ask them to. Yeah, maybe if you actually ask them to. But most of us instead were like, oh, they know me, they like me, they trust me, so I'll just keep giving them more things to know and like and trust. But I'll never actually ask because then I put it on them to come back to me with that reciprocity thing that I talked about that doesn't actually happen. So the missing key piece, the final step, the gorgeous icing, the finishing touch is in order for you to have a sustainable, heart-centered, ethics-driven, value-led business, yes, your customer has to know you. Yes, your customer has to like you. Yes, your customer has to trust you. And finally, your customer has to be asked to invest in you. If they are not asked to invest in you, they will go and invest in one of your peskier competitors who probably care less about them because they were more forward. So it's know, like, trust, asked.
I love that. I love that. And just like, I just want to be like, boom, mic drop when you said
Boom.
it. So true. Boom. And like my parents are small business owners as well. And they're more so in like the trucking and mechanical industry. And my dad sells sewer equipment and like these just like big trucks. And he goes, sometimes you literally just have to ask for the sale. Like you can talk features, you can talk how many, gallons per minute this is going to pump out of the sewer, or like, you can ask all these questions, but eventually it's just like, are you ready to get started? Like it doesn't have to be so like, are you ready to fork over that 400 grand? Like it doesn't have to be like that, but it's like, okay, we've talked about all the things, like, are you ready to move forward? If not now, when's a great time for you? Or just to have that conversation to be like, okay, like we're on the edge, we're on the edge, we're on the edge, we're at the top of the roller coaster, we're kind of tipping towards over the other side, or am I just going to let it roll back down and lose all that momentum I just built?
Right? 100 billion%. Because then what's stopping your dad's main competitor from noticing that? Saying, what's your dad's first name?
Dave.
Being like, oh, Dave got this all cleaned up. Got the pump all prime, but Dave didn't ask. So Dave did all the hard work doing all of the education about how many gallons of stuff you need pumped in and out and why these different things are better or why this is going to last this long versus that long, right? And all of this urban planning stuff that I certainly don't understand. And maybe the client doesn't either. But Dave's main competitor is like, hey, Dave, thanks for setting the table and making the dinner. I'm going to serve it, sit down, and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they're like, listen, I know you had a conversation with Dave. He's a really nice guy. But you need somebody who's going to deliver. So everything that Dave promised you, I can deliver that. All the promises that Dave made, I can deliver that. But I'm going to charge you an extra $100,000 because I'm the one actually asking you. What happens? Dave does all the work. Joe does all the profiting.
Mm-hmm.
That happens all the time. The same exact thing if we as coaches or healers open someone up to a new possibility, if we get them to bust through that door. Now, granted, right in that exact moment, we don't want to be like, you just had an epiphany, pay me. That's not what I'm saying. But if we get people to see their lives or their potential or themselves in a new way, and then we go, I hope you've enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much. They're going to go, what do I do with this newfound information? And then they're going to Google, I just had an epiphany. Who can help me realize it? And then they're going to go find someone with a buy button on their website, and they're going to pay them instead of paying you, even though you're the one that got them there.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, I see that happen all the time with coaching.
Yeah, but the best thing is that's entirely 100% preventable.
Mm-hmm.
It's the easiest and most profound change you can make. It may take time for you to figure out the ask that is right for you. But what doesn't take time is once you switch that flip of willingness in you to ask, you are far and away from totally changed from where you were. You will wake up the next day with a new and revived business just because you're choosing to include yourself.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, just because you're choosing to include yourself, right? And you get to continue the service that you offer because you're filling yourself up and you're including yourself in the table. You're paying yourself first is so, so key. And you had said this, and I'm like trying to find the exact wording, but you said there's a difference between like successfully promoting a service and then like actually selling the service. Like there was a difference between successfully promoting it and selling it.
Mm-hmm. There is. I mean, if you go to a baseball game.
And I love your examples. I'm a huge visual person, so I'm like, yes! I love the resource example, the cupcake, so good.
All right, well, here, we're going to talk about hot dogs.
Okay.
And my Chicago accent just came out real bad. We're going to talk about hot dogs. But so I grew up a St. Louis Cardinals fan, so let's go that way. If I am at Busch Stadium and I am watching the game, and everywhere around me, all during the game, I am starving, and I can smell hot dogs, and I can see dudes walking by with their big carts going, hot dogs, who wants a hot dog, who wants a hot dog? And I'm going, me, I want a hot dog, woo! I'm missing the game because I'm going, me, can I have a hot dog? I am starving. Anybody, pass the money down, right? You're like doing the thing where you're trying to get the people sitting next to you to get the attention of the dude. And imagine this, my whole row is flailing. We're all doing the wave. We're like, she wants a hot dog over here, hot dog. And the guy sees us and just keeps walking. That's what we do when we over promote. Because he's still walking around doing the same thing I'm doing. He's going, hot dog, who wants a hot dog? But he's not ever answering the people that say, hey, yes, I would like a hot dog. And he's
Mm.
not saying that'll be $8 or $8. That was like 1990. $75 or whatever a ballpark hot dog costs these days, right? That'll be this. And then he goes and he gives me the thing and he takes the money. He never does that. He just walks around going, hot dogs, you need one. Okay, I know I'm starving. Why won't you give me one? And that's the same thing we do when we're like, hey, social media, here's every single thought in my head. Hey, social media, here's 87 pictures of me doing all kinds of things. Hey, social media, here's me posting my testimonials and doing reels and making videos and being on podcasts. And I never ever say, hey, by the way, if this is relevant for you, I'd love to talk to you. Here's the next step about how we can do this together. If I don't open the door stays closed, and all I'm doing is going, hot dogs, in a sea of hungry people who never get fed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. That's such a cool, way to think about it is like you're always saying it, you're always putting it out there. You have people that are like biting and they're saying like, yes, I want this thing, but then you're not like taking that connection, going deeper and saying like, here's that pathway forward and asking, right? No, like trust, ask. I love that.
I love that so many episodes of this show have had such like a gorgeous whole food nutrition component, and then here I am talking about hot dogs and cupcakes. I'm like, hot dog! I think I've definitely set the record for saying hot dogs the most
I'm
on the
here for
Revive
it.
Life podcast. Yeah.
I love it so much. And that's where I'm like zero judgment, right? Like, I'm not like, oh, she must say kale. It must be kale. I
Oh
love
yeah. I mean, hey, depending on the game, if someone was walking around and they were like, kale, get your kale, I'd be, that's a novelty. I would love some kale.
give me that garlic spicy kale over here,
Yeah,
please.
you
Row
said
two.
those kale down. Are they in chip form? Like, yeah, go ahead.
Just ask. Ask and I will want it.
The next time I go to a baseball game, I'm going to stop the hot dog guy and I'll be like, excuse me, do you have any kale?
He's gonna look at you so cross, and then he is just gonna keep walking. He's like, I'm not gonna
No,
offer her a hot dog.
no, no. This woman is clearly crazy. They're going to evict me from the park. They're going to be like, lady, you got to go.
I love it so much. You gotta go.
Get
Um,
out.
so, being that you have had multiple times within your small business journey where you're like, all right, like this isn't working. I got to figure this out. Either like figure it out or this like new position, new path. Like this is I got to figure it out. How do you notice that most small businesses position themselves incorrectly? Quote unquote.
I notice that so many small businesses are still positioning themselves based on pieces of what they've seen on the internet from others.
Mm-hmm.
And that is aping. That's not really a strategy. And I think that what happens and why that feels really good is because our business looks really legit on paper, but we never actually talk about the pain points and we buy the solution of pain points.
Mm.
Whether it's I'm hungry and that hot dog smells good, that's a problem. Or I feel like I'm completely detached from my intuition, that's a problem. I have adrenal fatigue, that's a problem, right? And if we are looking at our brand and saying, are you looking forward to health and wholeness? But we never say, do you feel like crap?
Mm-hmm.
That is because we're like, ooh, I really like the way that they're promising that, but I don't want to be nasty or intrusive or any of these things. So I'll just talk about the positives and never talk about the negatives. And what that does is that creates the facade of a business that you can very easy, big bad wolf blow down when you're like, well, why? What's the why behind this business? The why is the pain point. You want to provide the cessation of that pain, especially if it's a pain that you yourself have encountered for others. But if we don't talk to the pain, it's hollow. So how people position themselves badly is twofold. They just carbon copy the best and shiniest of the people in their industry that are claiming to have it all together. And then they're building this house of cards with no pain points in it so that people don't ever actually feel seen. They feel intrigued, but not spoken to or included.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. They don't feel spoken to or included. And I can definitely notice that, right? Because it's like you got to talk about the vision and what's possible, right? Like that always has
Yes.
to be there. But you have to meet them where they're at, which is usually in pain of some form or fashion. And it was really interesting. I was at a retreat this past weekend, and I got to end it by going to another event where I saw just Tony Robbins speak at it. And it was really cool because he had the entire, there was like 3,000 people. He had everybody raise their hand, and he goes, okay, I want you to remember a moment where you broke through something. Raise your hand if you broke through it because like desire and pleasure motivated you. A lot of hands go up. And then he goes, all right, now think about if you broke through that moment because pain motivated you. And literally, it had to have been like 85-90% of the hands went up due
Yes.
to pain motivating them to change something in their lives
Yes.
versus like, everything's groovy, baby. Like, I just want even better things in my life. Like, it was such a small group of people who had that experience compared to the greater whole. And I've even noticed that with my content. Like, when I'm going through my own stuff and I'm trying to figure it out and like I have all the pieces connect and click, like, it's easy to go for more of like the surface, here's what we're moving towards, but like getting clear on the pain points. And when I do put those pain points, that's when the conversation starts happening. That's when people start raising their hand. That's when I can see like, oh, I'm not just getting views, I'm actually getting people engaged and they're the right fit person because they have this specific pain point.
Abso-freaking-lutely. 100 billion%. I mean, you literally asked me about my literal pain points earlier in this episode when you said, how is that failure and how is that stress showing up in your body? And we talked about how I blew out my gallbladder and didn't know that gallbladder pain is in your neck, right? So if I went to a website and it said, is your small business struggling? I'd be like, yeah, if it was at the time, right? Sure. I guess. I mean, what's struggling? It's all relative. I mean, I guess I'm doing pretty okay. I mean, I made some money yesterday. I have a couple of
Those
clients,
lies that our brain tells us.
right? And I talk myself out of it because I've been asked a vague question.
Mm-hmm.
If I went to a website and said, have you possibly blown out your gallbladder because your business is struggling? Did you know gallbladder pain is in your neck? Now, granted, that's a lot more niche, but instantly I would be like, this person is reading my mind. Like, I would be like, oh my God, yes, 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 yes. And then imagine if I got on with them and they said, listen, your health is toast. And it's not your fault, but it is your fault. Meaning, it's not your fault that you've gotten to this point. You didn't know any better. You didn't know that it would have this effect on you. No one in their right mind would do this to their body intentionally. However, it will become your fault if you don't rise up to change it. Well, then, what I'm saying is, do you want this pain to continue or not? If you don't want this pain to continue, this is the solution I propose for you. Okay, cool. But if I got on that call the first time and they're like, I'm so excited you're ready to dramatically change your business, Annie, let's dive in. I'd be like, hold on. Something's missing. What's missing? What's missing is you don't really know where I am. So how can you possibly know how far I need to go if you don't even know where I'm starting? If you don't know what my emotional world is? And it's hard to create that space of transparency and vulnerability for people who aren't coaches and healers and light workers and do-gooders, but for people like us, that's all it is. Holding space. You're not preying on the person, you're holding space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And offering an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll love you if you want to stay there, and I'll also love you if you want to move forward with me.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. As you were describing that, I had like a flashback to a doctor's appointment I went to a couple weeks ago, and I was just like, this is why I don't like Western medicine, because I went in and just did not ask questions to get to know me. It was like, do you have animals? Like, what hobbies do you like to do? And I'm like, those are great surface level questions, but like, I'm at the doctor. Like, I want you to ask some like depth questions
Yeah,
to
could
get
you
to know
ask
my
about
health.
my body, please?
Yeah. Right. And I even like lobbed it, right? I wanted to see like, will you take the bait? And I lobbed like, oh, well, I haven't always been this healthy. And like, just was like, oh, but it matters what you're doing now. And I'm like, you're probably assuming I had a weight challenge. I ate out fast food. Like, you probably assume what that, I overdrank, right? Like, you're probably assuming these types of things. You totally missed my entire health history and journey with inflammation in my body in Western medicine. Like, you missed such a juicy iceberg that you just glazed past because you're like, oh, well, it matters where you're at now.
Yeah, because your hobbies and your pets are the most important part.
Right? Total markers of health.
Right? You're like trying to fit health marker information into those questions. You're like, yes, when my crippling arthritis isn't hurting me, I like to crochet. And when I can move my spine, I like to chase my dog. When I can move my spine, which I can't right now, thanks for asking.
Exactly. I know. I
Right?
just felt so like I remember leaving there and I was so hopeful for a different experience going for like a physical and a doctor's appointment. And I was just like, ugh, a little dagger. I was like, I just want that industry to change so desperately and like understand connection and getting to know people on the level that we're talking about.
Yeah, because just because you were comfortable doesn't mean you were heard.
Right.
And you go to a doctor to either identify a problem or solve one or prevent one.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a problem involved.
Yes.
So if they're like, oh, do you prefer crocheting or knitting? You're like, I prefer not being in pain, thank you. When are we going to get to that?
Right? Oh, cool. No, not today. Maybe next visit. All right, cool.
Yeah, maybe next visit when I pay like 19 more copays, we can talk
Get to
about the fact that I have horrible indigestion. Oh, no? No, we're going to talk about my dog some more? Okay. But we do the same thing on these discovery calls. Samantha, it's so great to meet you. You're wearing purple. I love purple. How long have you been wearing purple? Who cares?
I'm laughing because I know it's so true with all the people that I've worked with in the past. Like, because I got to coach and train other health coaches and like around discovery calls, and it's just such a funny learning curve in this business. And so I'm just so appreciative and loving this conversation and that you read all those books, you found your method, you tested it, and you really just brought it back to it's so simple. Know, like, trust, ask. Like once you do that, everything gets to change. And I think a lot of the times when it comes to the money part of like, well, what if they say no? What if I fail? What if, and we go that catastrophizing route, but what if they say yes? What if you get to transform their life in a way you both never even imagined was absolutely possible? What if you feel so good in your health, your life, your business, your finances, and you actually get to take that vacation because you asked?
A billion, trillion, zillion% spot on. Because what you just described is we're so nervous about alienating the client. We're so nervous about, or the prospect, we're so nervous about looking like an insensitive jerk. We're so nervous about being rejected that what happens is we shut ourselves down. So we don't look like jerks. We look aloof and dispassionate. We don't offend the client, but we don't include the client. And we reject ourselves first. We reject ourselves and we reject them because we feel like they're about to reject us. And when we do that, we close the door to all possibilities, just like you said.
Mm-hmm. Drop in the mics.
Drop in the mics. Boom, 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 boom. Everybody's listening is just going to hear a whole bunch of thunks. Like, thunk.
We're just dancing over here on the video.
Meanwhile, my podcast producer is like, I heard you dropped your mic the other day. Please don't do that. It's not good for the microphone. I'm like, no! I had to make a point! Bam!
Let it drop. I'll get a new mic.
Yeah!
I love connecting with you so much, Annie, and I'm just curious, like as we start to close out, is there any final words of encouragement or advice or anything else that you'd want to leave everyone listening with?
I am not the only person out here trying to destigmatize selling. There are lots of us out here that are doing the same thing. We have different styles, we have different ways, but what I'm going to implore you to do, listeners, is I need you to just accept one thing and one thing only, which is that you are not allergic to selling. You are allergic to the way that you've been sold to by buttheads. But that butt-headed behavior is not required of you. I implore each of you to go out and practice asking until you hone the way that feels wonderful. If you need support in that, that's what I'm here for. But a lot of this is experimentation based solely on you. And once you get into that place, all possibility opens up and all sleaze fades away. It all starts with your willingness to ask.
So good. I'm dropping the mic again. And
Bam!
but like you said, that willingness to experiment is really key, right? You're not going to get it right the first time. It's going to feel a little uneasy. You have to be willing to experiment and try it in a ton of different ways. And like you're saying, you're here and an amazing resource to help you do that experimentation, to move through the ick, to move through all the feels of that process. But that ultimately, there's no one right way or style, but what ultimately feels best for you. And so this is a question that I've been playing with lately, but I think so many times we focus on the butt heads of how we were sold to and how crappy it felt. And like, that's what we think of when selling. But instead of just, again, where energy goes or where focus goes, energy goes.
Yep.
And so instead of focusing on the butt heads and the style of selling that you despised, focus on how would I like to be asked? What would feel good and inclusive?
Yes.
Like, just change it, focus there, get into that energy, and then experiment with those ways, right? Like, there's no like, well, this part in the conversation, then I got to drop this and I've got to prime them for this. It's like, nope, I got to connect, I got to listen to them, I got to really hear them, understand those pain points, and then make that invitation from that same energy versus being like, and I'm a new person all of a sudden.
Whoa.
Yes. And then they repel. Oh my gosh. So good, Annie. For anybody who is like, I so want your help experimenting, or I just want to be in your energy while I'm in this process, where can they connect and be in your space with you?
You're always welcome to head to my website, which is anniePruggles.com. But listen, if you are in active sales avoidance, I want you to bypass my website completely. Don't even bother. There's a lot of awesome stuff there. There's a quiz, there's a masterclass, there's about 97 amazing podcast interviews, whatever. But if you're in active sales avoidance, do not go to my website. I want you to reach out to me so I can help you prep and I can help you solve that problem in as close to real time as possible. And the best way for me to invite you to do that is to reach out to me and let me know what's on your plate at either Instagram, where I'm at Anniepreneur, ANNIEPRENEUR, or LinkedIn, where you can just search my name. I want to hear from you so that I can serve you. That is more important to me than that click rate going up on my website.
And everybody listening, how freaking amazing was that ask? Right? Like, it was so simple and it's so heart focused, right? Like, I want to get to know you. I want to meet you where you're at. And if you're at this specific place, don't go do that. Just come tell me where you're at and let's have a conversation, right? Like, so simple, so heart forward, but making the ask, making that invitation.
We can have a discovery moment whenever it's possible for us to get together. We don't have to have a whole call, but we can move that needle for you, and it would be my honor to do so.
Yay. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Annie, for modeling so beautifully what it is that you do, you teach, you invite other people into. And this was so fun. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for letting me yell about hot dogs. I so appreciate it.
Anytime. Anytime.
So much fun and seriously so much valuable information that I find is so needed for so many of the individuals that I've had conversations with over the years, and even my own sales process and understanding. Like, if we can so often, like, one of the big things that I took away from that episode is when we over market but we undersell. and that we can show up on social media, we could be showing all the things, but are we really asking to take that next step with people? So I cannot wait to hear what your takeaway is that you want to start experimenting with first in your business. So head to Instagram, find me at revived_living, and send me a DM of what your takeaway was, or feel free to tag me in a story. It's always so cool to see where it is that you're listening in to these episodes. So at revived_living is where you can find me. And if you're loving these episodes, please take a minute to rate and review us while you're here in the app. It allows us to spread this content to more and more individuals who are wanting to revive their life with simple, free tools, and it helps us keep it free. So it means the world when you take a moment to do just that. And to find more about Annie and all things in our show notes, you can find us at revived-living.com/episode-062. Thanks for tuning in to the Revive Life. Remember to do one small thing for yourself. No matter how small it is, it all adds up. I'll see you on the next episode.